Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Redding, ASA's Washington, D.C. representative, and welcome to today's webinar, Telematics Policy for Shop Owners. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items to better help you participate in today's event. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentations. We'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentations. Please include your first name and city and state. Now let's get started. First, I want to introduce Donny Seyfer. Donny Seyfer from Wheat Ridge, Colorado, is co-owner of Seyfer Automotive, a 35-year experienced technician, manager, and service consultant. Donny is an ASE Master L1 Advanced Diagnostic Technician and C1 Service Consultant. Donny is a respected automotive author, having written numerous articles, co-authored various editorial pieces in a variety of publications. Donny is currently chairman of the Automotive Service Association. He served in leadership positions for various industry organizations. He's received numerous awards from associations, industry groups, as well as testing organizations. Donny's well known in the Denver, Colorado area as a 17-year host of Drive Radio, a consumer call-in show very popular in the community, and Gearhead's high performance program at Denver's KLZ AM 560. Donny, welcome, and if you would, give us a few comments as to what's on your mind regarding telematics.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that very much. We thought that it would be really valuable for our members and friends in the industry to have an opportunity to sort of hear from the folks that have been working at the highest levels of this. And so for us, one of our biggest concerns has really been getting this information out to our shops so that they can adapt their business model to these changes that are coming, and also to understand the policy. For our collision members, a lot of times these policy changes are pretty widespread, and they're used to looking at these things and making adjustments in their business. But for our mechanical members, it's not as much. We don't see those kinds of things quite as often, where there's really wide sweeping changes like this happening. So this is a bit of a culture shock, if you will, for our guys. So we wanted to start bringing that up so that both our collision and our service repair members can start getting their head around it and really figure out how to adapt and work with this while we're working on the policy.
Thank you, Donny. And now I'd like to introduce Chris Gardner, Vice President, Automotive Aftermarket Suppliers Association. Chris helps manage APEX, the largest aftermarket trade show in the industry, and manages all technology areas for AASA members, including the AASA Technology Council. He has 30 years of experience in the automotive industry, has received 2 automotive component patents, and has written dozens of articles and white papers on various automotive technologies, materials, and processes. He's been with MEMA, the MEMA organization, has managed the AASA Technology Council for 18 years. Chris is also a proud member of the North Carolina State Wolfpack. Welcome, Chris, and if you would, let us hear from you and comments regarding the automotive aftermarket.
Bob, thank you very much. It's a privilege to be on the webinar today, and thank you everybody for joining in. Just a couple of points I wanted to make before we get into our discussion. One is at AASA, we recognized that the connected car was coming, but it was a few years off, but there were a lot of technologies being developed and introduced that were connecting a lot of people and things. So we coined the term the connected aftermarket to describe how our industry is using the Internet of Things, or IoT, and other connected technologies to improve business processes and connect with customers and provide enhanced value and enhanced services. And it really, this covers the use of sensors and networks on vehicles to measure and collect physical information, and then to collect this data and send it somewhere. And a lot of us are aware of what's going on with the mobile app and dongle industry. So we've got the OBD2 port. That's a sort of a portal gateway of gathering information and sending it off to a cloud application, and then back to somewhere. The growing area here is in the form, it's been sent to consumers or drivers or motorists in the form of smart devices and mobile apps, so that they can get greater information about their vehicle, make decisions that they've never been able to make before, and so forth. There are literally hundreds of these companies that have been emerging over the last couple of years. And now we see some new technologies in the area of using mobile phones to actually conduct B2B processes, actual transactional processes that we've always done on our computers and workstations and such, like EDI and e-commerce and inventory lookups and so forth and so on, that the mobile apps are now enable people to be flexible, move around, and to conduct these processes between manufacturers and distributors and jobber stores and in the future probably even shops. So that's an emerging area that we're keeping an eye out. Now the benefits to these technologies are many, and I'm speaking to this as on behalf of the parts manufacturers, but the ability to connect with and maintain relationships with consumers, of course, is essential and critical to the repair community. It is. But it also may generate a possible boon to suppliers who don't always, or in rare cases, actually touch the consumer directly. And so with the ability to move information and data around between individuals or consumers, their vehicles, and the repair community, possibly will create opportunities for the parts suppliers to be part of that connectivity, that world. And then the ultimate goal would be to be able to have enough data on what's going on to be able to predict part failure, how parts perform over time, etc., so that the entire industry can do a better job of inventory management, having the right part at the right place, the right time, not having as many stranded motorists. There's just tremendous value where this technology ultimately is going to take us. So there's a lot going on, and the manufacturers in some cases are creating some of this technology, the parts suppliers, and in some cases they're watching and waiting to see what's going to happen. So it's interesting dynamics that are happening out there. So Bob, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I'd like next to turn to Wayne Weikel. Wayne is Senior Director for the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, a trade association representing 12 of the world's largest OEMs, including BMW, Chrysler, Ford, GM, Jag Land Rover, Mazda, Mercedes-Benz, Mitsubishi, Porsche, Toyota, Volkswagen, and Volvo. Wayne joined the Alliance in January of 2012. In his current capacity, he serves as a primary liaison for the Alliance interaction with state officials across the U.S. He manages a diverse portfolio of public policy interests ranging from green energy and clean manufacturing to distracted driving and digital privacy. Wayne also serves on the OEM Crash Parts Roundtable. Before moving to Washington, Wayne had a celebrated career in the Massachusetts State House. He was Chief of Staff and Policy Director of the House Committee on Ways and Means. Prior to that, he served on the Joint Committee on Financial Services. Some of the key areas he worked on in the Massachusetts legislature were the deregulation of the automobile industry, as well as health reform. Throughout the years, Wayne's been involved in numerous political campaigns, including work at local, state, congressional, and presidential elections. Wayne, welcome. Glad to have you.
Great, thanks, Bob. I appreciate you including us. You know, as the manufacturers, it is certainly helpful for us to have direct conversation with those who are actually working on the vehicles that our members produce. I'd like to set up today's conversation about telematics within sort of the context of all of the recent technological advancements that are going on in the automotive industry right now. I mean, I heard one story recently led in by describing the level of change that's going on as something that is unprecedented since Henry Ford invented the production line. It's that much of a transformative time. And as a car guy for my whole life, I do find it to be an exciting time to be in the auto industry. We've seen technological advancements in alternate fuels like hydrogen and battery electric vehicles, which admittedly have been somewhat slow to take off and have existed as sort of a niche market so far. But that's going to change. A few more developments in advanced storage capacity, and you're going to see a big shift towards electric vehicles. For the most part, electric vehicles have gotten a bad rap so far. The new Chevy Spark EV is supposed to have about 400 foot-pounds of torque. And that's a fun car to drive. Once people get in the seat, I think you're going to start seeing more of those in your shop. In the world of autonomous vehicles, things are changing just as quickly. For years, vehicles and vehicle systems could only measure what was inside the vehicle, coolant level, oil temperature. But sort of as we've moved down this automated technology spectrum with the use of advanced sensors, vehicles can now measure and monitor the world around the car. And when you layer on top of that the connected car technology, you're talking about a vehicle that is just in constant communication with the whole world around it. The reason you hear so much conversation right now about automation is because OEs are pouring millions upon millions of dollars into R&D in this area. It seems like there is a new advancement or announcement every week of capabilities that are out there. But they're not just pushing these advancements for advancement's sake. They're doing it because over 38,000 people died on our roadways last year. A number that, according to NHTSA, 94% was attributable to driver error, with the remaining 6% being split between a vehicle problem, the environment, or unknown. So there's no question that this technology, once fully developed, will be a better operator than a human driver. And what this will likely mean for any collision guys on the call is that while we'll probably see a reduction in frequency, we'll probably see an increase in severity just because of the cost of the technology that we're now going to find on everyday vehicles. In the world of telematics, things are just as interesting. You're already seeing first-generation systems in the area that can measure and report vehicle health while in use. There are insurer-based systems that provide driver discounts for safe driving. There are both OE and aftermarket systems that can send an email to the customer with a vehicle health report on a periodic basis, or when a problem occurs in a vehicle. I don't know if any of you service fleet vehicles, but commercial fleet owners have been the leading edge of telematics technology to monitor and proactively plan for vehicle maintenance, since their businesses depend on this sort of vehicle uptime. That they've made a lot of the investments to learn these new technologies. What we've learned at the Alliance is that over the past few years is that having a connected car comes with a whole host of new issues. We've had to jump into privacy issues to learn about best practices around the collection and protection of consumer data. We've had to jump into the world of cybersecurity to learn about hacking threats and methods of gaining access to vehicle systems that we had not considered previously. And with every new advancement, there seems to be a new hurdle to figure out and eventually overcome. I'm not going out too far on a limb to say that anyone who thinks they know what the next 20 years will bring will undoubtedly be proven wrong. The electrified, autonomous, connected, car-sharing world in our future is going to be pretty interesting.
All right. Thanks so much, Wayne. Well, I have a few questions while we're waiting on participants to submit their questions of interest, so now's a good time to start sending them in. To warm us up a little bit, Wayne, we'll kick it off with you. When OEMs discuss telematics from a policy perspective, what are the top areas of concern?
Top areas of concern. So the obvious answer is cybersecurity. And that's true, and I'll get back to it. But I actually start on a different angle. While not exactly a policy perspective, the biggest issue for OEs is consumer acceptance of technology. OEs know that they have a technology, these new technologies that have many capabilities, but what do they do with it? What is the consumer value? Understand that OEs don't sit around and sort of work out together what they're going to develop and how they're going to develop it. It's a cutthroat, competitive marketplace in that there are somewhere around 26 OEs in the U.S. that are fighting to be the leader on every front. The biggest concern for developing something in that sort of space is that they develop something that does not meet the needs of the consumer and thereby is essentially a waste of their R&D money. So the biggest concern is meeting the needs of the consumer, and to have concern and they have concerns if a policy is going to stand in the way of that mission. Having said that, you can't talk telematics without talking cybersecurity. Having a connected car brings with it an increased exposure to cyber threats, but our members are investing millions to address these potential exposures. How can they meet the customer demand in a secure manner? That's sort of what everyone is working on right now. Just this week, the Auto ISAC, ISAC stands for Information Sharing Analysis Centers, something the auto industry created last year to sort of get around antitrust issues of competitors sharing information. But the Auto ISAC this week just released a set of principles that will form the basis for cyber best practices moving forward. And this isn't just OEs. Suppliers have joined. Because in cybersecurity, it's the weakest link that gets exposed. If you guys remember the big Target hack either last year or the year before, entry into the Target's database was gained through accessing an HVAC contractor's computer that was still linked to the Target network. That's how deep cybersecurity protection has to go. It's not just whether they can hack, into the main connection to the vehicle. It's every other possible way that the computer is sending information remotely, including like vehicle tire pressure sensors. That transmits remotely. That is a conceivable avenue in, and there's just the cybersecurity. Legislators have heard me say this a lot. But the cybersecurity threats and risks on this are just the top area of concern on anything to do with the connected vehicle right now.
Donny, Chris, any follow-up?
Yeah, one comment. I completely agree with Wayne that cybersecurity is an issue. What we're talking about here are essentially wireless networks, and anytime you have a wireless network, it's hackable. And whether we like it or not, there are the white hats out there, and then there's guys who wear the black hats, and they're going to try to. So it's imperative that cybersecurity be worked out to allow a number of different stakeholders, the consumers being one of them, and insurance companies and other vehicles and the independent aftermarket and OE dealers and on, to have access to a car to do what they need to do what the customer needs to do, yet at the same time ensure the security. So it's a huge deal.
Donny?
Yeah, Bob, I would add that we've had the opportunity to work, ASA has, both with the OEs and with the aftermarket on these pieces, and we're taking this very seriously. And one of the projects we're working on right now is to put together some experts in the IT world that work with small business and have them help us. In fact, we're pretty close to having this done. Have them help us with some, if you will, best practice type of pieces, so that as a business you can say, I need to tighten down my network so that things like this Target thing, I don't wind up being part of that when I've got a scan tool connected to a car. That's one of our biggest concerns from our point of view. So we're really close to having that sort of piece in place. We've got Cisco helping us with some of this, and then we've got some independent contractors that will do some training things for us, So what we're really trying to focus on right now is how can we make sure that our folks are not part of the problem, but part of the solution.
Well, let me follow that up, Donny, if I could, and please, Wayne or Chris, comment on this if you desire. What do you think, Donny, are the greatest technology threats to the independent repair market?
I think that we are probably our own biggest threat if we do not take this seriously. If you've seen any of the presentations that I've done for ASA or some of the other places that I've been, my biggest thing I'm trying to get people to get from all of these events and all of these telematics programs I go to is we have to learn this technology incrementally. And saying, well, you know, they don't have it down yet, so I'm really not going to learn it until they do, is a mistake. Because what's going to happen is you take some of the existing systems that are already on the vehicle, and most of you, I'm sure, listening are technical as your background anyway, but you look at things like cruise control that can see down the road and adjust its speed, and throttle controls that are basically drive-by-wire. You're not using any kind of cable. All of those sorts of things are going to become parts of the types of vehicles that Wayne's describing. I'm driving an electric Ford Focus as my daily driver, and it looks a lot like a hybrid. It just simply doesn't have an engine in there. And so as you learn those technologies, as these new things come out, there'll be a lot more, oh, I know that. I know what to do with that. And I think that's really critical. We have to learn this stuff incrementally.
So you would say, from your perspective, from what you just alluded to, you would say you believe the independent shops will be able to access vehicle data in the future, or not?
In all the conversations that we've had, and Wayne can jump on me if he disagrees with this, in all the conversations we've had, they always recognize the necessity of having the same kind of user experience in our shops because of the number of vehicles that we're currently repairing. If we are not doing the same things that the OEs are doing at the engineering level to secure these cars and to work on them, people aren't going to buy the technology, and there's already a big learning curve, and there's already some real high trepidation. I was in a panel discussion a while back with a bunch of the guys who write the software. They said 84% of them said the biggest problem getting this stuff out there is not going to be creating it, it's not going to be securing it, it's going to be getting people to believe it and feel comfortable and safe in turning the vehicle controls over to a computer. So I think we have to be on top of all of this stuff, and we have to be part of the conversation with our customers as this technology comes out.
Thanks, Donny. Chris, any comments? Wayne? Chris, tell me from a parts supplier perspective, how do you see us taking advantage of the telematics landscape? You mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but elaborate.
I'll do that. Thanks, Bob. One is, let me share a little bit of a concern from the parts supplier, and then I'll talk about your question. I think that there's a handful of the parts suppliers, and that's the top large, typically they're international suppliers. They've been dealing with telematics and connected car technologies for over a dozen years. They've been developing them for their tier 1 OEM customer relationship purposes, and they get it. I think there's a large number of parts suppliers, parts manufacturers, who are still on the sideline looking, and they're trying to identify how to get into this game, how to be a part of it, how not be relegated to the sidelines and be left behind when it comes to telematics. If you think about an exhaust manufacturer or a caliper manufacturer, whatever, and they're probably thinking, how's this going to impact me? Well, sensors and the Internet of Things and connectivity, connected cars are going to impact everybody. So that's one point. Is a lot of the parts suppliers are trying to identify, do they partner with a technology company or do they develop it internally, and they're struggling with those right now. So just that's just one observation. But to answer your question, there's sort of this holy grail idea out there, and that is that at some point, I don't think there's any doubt we're heading in that direction, that data is going to be flowing from vehicles to consumers to shops or to some third-party company that helps the consumer make decisions on that data that the vehicle is generating. The holy grail is where the entire community, entire industry can take the cars that are in use and compare that to how cars are being driven and handled and the wear and tear, compare that to data that's being measured and monitored and collected from the cars, and be able to predict failure and to be able to then make parts to need as opposed to making gazillions of parts that sit in various warehouses and various stores around the country. We all know the independent aftermarket is very effective in getting parts there to the shop to get cars replaced, but it's not necessarily very efficient. And this would create a lot more efficiencies. Other industries, Bob, have done this. The rail industry is doing it, and the construction industry with Deere and Cat and those guys. They sort of own their own supply chain, but they've been including sensors on parts and monitoring wear and things like that, and having telematics send them back the data, and they can tell what's going on and can predict pretty closely when parts are going to fail. They've been doing that for a few years, so it can be done. Technology exists. The question is when, and when will the entire industry have to, it's going to have to work together to do it. When will that happen?
Thanks, Chris. We have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to combine a few of these, but numerous questions about dongles. Here, we'll kick it off, and this is for all of you who are interested in commenting. Is the only application of telematics available to the aftermarket repair a dongle? And a follow-up, what would keep other shops or individuals from removing a dongle?
I guess I want to qualify that. So if I understand this, the question is, if the vehicle comes in with one on it, what would keep a shop from just removing it?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing. And in fact, I think that's going to be a straight-up necessity to do diagnostic work on a vehicle. So I think that they'll have to be removed from the vehicle to be able to do diagnostic work. And while we're on this, because I'm sure this is going to come up, one of the biggest concerns that the industry as a whole has about these things is that the level of security that's built in them is all over the map. Some of them have security, some are absolutely wide open. You can see them going down the road and attached to them because they don't require bidirectional agreement to connect. So that's definitely a concern.
Well, let me ask you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Bob. I just wanted to comment on, respond to what Donnie said about the security of the dongles. That is a huge concern, and I don't know that anybody really thought about that, or not many people did a few years ago when they first started being developed. But the Department of Homeland Security recently had, well, I don't know how recent it was when they contracted, but they had a study done at the Carnegie Mellon, and it was published in March. And some of you may have already seen this, but it alluded to exactly what Donnie was just saying, that the security level, the ability for these dongles and the vehicle to be compromised because of the lack of security, it's all over the place. So they actually rated maybe a dozen different dongles and gave them good, not very good, and very susceptible to being hacked ratings for these things. And you know what? It was kind of scary when I read that report.
Thank you, Chris. Let me ask Wayne, if I could. You represent numerous vehicle manufacturers. Are their telematics policies and approaches similar, dissimilar, yet to be determined? How do you see it?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question, Bob. As I said before, there are approximately 26 manufacturers selling in the U.S. right now, depending on how you count some of the smaller ones. And that is a challenge for us as an association that's charged with sort of developing, one position. Is that each manufacturer has a different take on where they are going as an individual company, and B, where they are on their path toward that goal. So when you have competitive companies that view sort of a different goal or a different end place or a different approach to get there, it's tough for us frequently to try to coalesce a single position. You've got some leaders in the market that have been in this sort of telematics space before we knew to call it a telematics space. And then we've got other manufacturers that are completely on the other end and, are much more sort of a traditional view of a vehicle. And sometimes there's not a lot of crossover between the two. So deciding how an industry as a whole is going to handle telematics as a whole, or deal with NHTSA requests, or things from the other federal agencies, it's actually really complicated for us because there isn't that sort of singular thing. I actually want to jump, if you don't mind,
Sure.
I want to jump back. Donny had answered a question about access to vehicle data in the future. And I definitely agree with him. I've never really understood this sort of fear that this new technology is going to somehow change the marketplace dramatically. What we said during Right to Repair, all through those fights, still holds true. Over 70% of the repairs are conducted in the independent community, and I'm one of them. I'm basing a new car purchase presently on what car I know I can bring to my guy. And, I think a lot of people are like that. OEs know that the perception of their product includes how easily they are to get repaired. And the last thing a company wants is a reputation for, their vehicle somehow being a problem. And think back to the manufacturers that used to use Lucas Electrics, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It took decades for them to shake this idea that, especially British cars had bad electrics. Manufacturers understand that how, an experience that someone gets repairing a vehicle impacts whether they're going to buy that vehicle again in the future. So I just don't see the somewhat irrational fear that somehow this is OEs are going to just shut off access to vehicle data. Not to mention that this underlying right to repair and MOU, a right to repair law in Massachusetts, and a national MOU that sort of covers all this anyway. But I just wanted to touch on that.
Thank you. That could be a segue to this question coming in for all of you. Where does the industry stand, various segments, in regards to legislation or just general policy? I know we had a California bill, Rhode Island bill, some other state bills relative to these issues, but what about who owns the data and who should or should not have access to it? Don't be shy about jumping in on this one.
So that's two questions, right?
Go on, Donny.
Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so we kind of have two questions there. So where are we at on the legislative piece of it? I think that at some point, once all of this technical stuff gets sorted out, here's my panacea. We would be able to go aftermarket repairers and OEs to Washington and say, this is what we think will work. Can you guys write the law? That would be, I think, be the ultimate way to go at it, and I think that's what we're trying to do right now. It's hard to keep that on the rails all the time because a lot of folks are stressed out and worried that this is going to happen without them, and it's hard to get everybody in the same room and all of those things, but I think that's really what we're trying to do right now. The second question, from my point of view only, of who does the data belong to, I think that we can sort of lay this out similar to, let's talk about if you buy Microsoft Word from Microsoft, Microsoft owns the software. They created it. They've got patents. They've got trademarks. They've got all these things that belong to them with that. However, the work that you do in that, that belongs to you, and you can do what you want with that. And I think that's going to ultimately be, that's the way the software folks that are building this software are talking about it. But there's a huge amount of money on the table. So this is definitely going to have some debate. And who wants to control how this data is managed and sold and not sold, but let's be realistic, it's going to be sold. So that's my take, and I know Wayne will probably have a different view on that.
Yeah, sure. Answering in almost reverse order is what Donny just did. When we talk about data and ownership and that, we actually think that the more useful, a more descriptive way to describe it is not about who owns the data, but who gets access to the data, who uses the data. And we sort of realized this when we developed these privacy principles in 2014, that was more the question. No one owns data, so the question is who uses the data? How is it handled? And that is how we approached our privacy principles, which we released in 2014 and got a lot of credit for. We're essentially ahead of just about every other industry sector in our principles of what we will and will not do with data. And it treats data differently of data that is anonymized versus data that is identifiable to an individual. And one of the big things out of that, Bob, you made a note, I think Bob, you said about, or Donny did, about selling data. That's one of the things that we came out with very strong in our principles of saying that we would not market to a consumer without their consent, and we would not allow any of our third-party affiliated companies or partners and things, also would not let them market to our customers without the customer expressly detailing a consent to allow that. Trying to really address that very point of, we want to sell you cars. We don't want to, sell your data. But jumping back to the sort of role of state government or federal government in this, it's actually one that's been kind of complicated for us. And I'll sort of give an example in the context of autonomous vehicles, as that technology is a little more in the forefront in the public policy world. Over the past few years, we've seen legislatures across the country, probably 20 of them, file some sort of legislation thinking that they needed to pass legislation to permit us to come in and test autonomous vehicles in their state, that they had to do something or they were going to miss out on this economic development angle that they were trying to get in front of. Well, what sort of happens then is we're forced to go in and explain that since there is no law against testing autonomous vehicles in a state, we don't need a law permitting us to test in a state. And in fact, we've probably already been testing safely within that state. The problem in all this is that laws and regulations move very slowly while technology moves quickly. When we have a new technology, no one really knows for sure how that's going to develop. The last thing we want is to see a government body come in and to tell innovators how to develop that technology. The marketplace tends to figure these things out based on consumer acceptance and consumer desires. We sort of ran into this in like the final round of right to repair negotiations in Massachusetts back a few years ago. Proponents of the legislation wanted to have make it clear that instead of a proprietary tool, this is one of the founding principles of the law, instead of a proprietary tool, a shop would be able to read and conduct repairs, read information off the vehicle and conduct repairs using a USB cable and a laptop. Well, and they wanted to put those terms, USB cable and laptop, in the actual law. Well, that was great in 2012, but, we kept asking, well, what if that technology changes? What if the USB is replaced by a faster cable or no cable at all? And what if data could be delivered to a phone or a tablet instead of a laptop? You know, as Bob said at the beginning, I worked in the legislature for 10 years. It's really difficult to regulate the future, and especially the future of technology. And that's sort of what we're talking about in the telematics area. You know, when technology is still developing, it's not really ideal to have the government put a stamp on the right way to do something. You know, that's how you end up with Betamax over VCR. But not only that, that's how you end up with Betamax, and you never get to DVDs, and you never get to live streaming. You know, there is a sort of a pathway of innovation, and you know, government regulation of controlling what that path that is something we you know, have a lot of trouble with. So we've traditionally opposed just about all these bills in the states, just for that fact that, you know, if our OEs don't know which direction this is going to go, it's certainly hard to ask a public policymaker to come in and predict where this is going to go.
All right.
Hey, Bob.
Yes, sir.
It's really difficult to add to what these two intelligent people are saying, but I'm going to try. Number one is Wayne, I was actually going to say the very same thing, is that technology outpaces legislature in almost every case. One good news about that, although this is going to take a long time, is that over time the legislatures and, of course, regulators as well are going to be a little bit more up on technology as the young, you know, replace the old. So that's going to take time for sure. But I just got to believe that over the past 25 years, a lot of the legislators just didn't get it. So hopefully over time that they'll have a better feel for that. And I give you an example of one thing that has changed. The Digital Millennial Copyright Act is, we know for sure that there are some proponents of that act originally that now have come back and said, wow, this is really not what was originally meant, and technology has changed. Access to the software and over the air and what people use it for has all changed. But the other thing I wanted to comment on was Donny was talking about the approach, and at AASA we couldn't agree more that working together with the car manufacturers and the aftermarket, any other critical stakeholder, going in with common language is the best way. There are several technology solutions that are being investigated and are underway. Some of them involve actual interfaces that are on the car itself. Others involve cloud-based solutions that would have data, you know, sent wirelessly to the cloud, where there's a third party that is a gateway provider to permissions and allows the users, as Wayne was talking about, to those that are approved or legit, to have access to the data and all that. But our preference is we collectively figure out a technical solution that works for all legit stakeholders, and then let that become the norm and take that to the hill.
Thanks, Chris. We've got a collision repair who's sent a question in. He said, don't forget about us collision repairers. And he asked about the security of all these devices, specifically in their relationship with insurance companies and fleets. Any comments on that?
Yeah, Bob, you're talking cybersecurity security, I presume?
Of these devices, seeming like the black box and others.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I'm a little out of my depth on this answer, so forgive me. But I certainly feel for shops that are now put in this position where, you know, they feel like they need to be the one that sticks the dongle on the vehicle, because they also feel like, you know, if they're not talking to their customer about this, someone else might be. But in the context of cybersecurity, there's just no way, you know, I heard Donny was talking about some things with Cisco earlier, and I think that's a great approach. A shop owner is certainly put in a tough position to have to evaluate the cybersecurity of, you know, these sort of dongles that are out there now that, you know, hackers that are out there are quite creative, and you know, when a dongle maker is putting out a new program out there, that, you know, they're certainly thinking that they've, you know, producing it in a secure way, you know, until you get a creative hacker that finds a way around that. You know, and you know, there is some liability about being the one who's telling the customer to put it on there. It's really a tough place, I think, for a shop to be. You know, as was said, the range of sophistication of these dongles is pretty dramatic. That some get it and have tried to harden up their systems, and others don't, and that they are completely open and are just, you know, telematically sending out a lot of data with no real security on it. Yeah, I didn't answer the question, but I agree that it's a problem and a concern.
Chris or Donny?
I guess I'd like to jump in on that and say, if you don't buy a plane ticket to go to Anaheim and and join in on all of this stuff we've got going on directly related to this, and this is not a commercial, this is just pure straight up passion that our presenters have put this stuff together for you. And if you don't think that it was worth it, Dan Risley and I will write you a check back for your deal. It will absolutely knock you over. And we have not forgotten the collision guys. In fact, our TTF program this year, we've actually added a whole component of the technology on top of that. We've got 2 cyber panels that are come from 2 different angles, and I think that there's no way we could cover this in an hour, but we're going to have about 4 hours spread out through 2 days of just this type of content. And we are very concerned about our collision members because they're the guys who usually see this first. And we want them to be absolutely up on this stuff. You know, our mechanical members, other than, you know, doing the light maintenance work, aren't going to usually see repairs till a few years out of warranty. So, you know, we've got a little time to start perfecting our methods, but you could see a new car the day it rolls off the lot in a collision shop, and that keeps me up at night, and I don't even do collision repair.
Thanks, Donny. We've got a lot of questions coming here, but we have a variety of people on the call. But one, and this is from an educator, is a technological solution on the horizon, and will it be retroactive to these connected vehicles now on the road? And that seems like it's a very general question, but a very fair question about a way to get to some type of solution and answer to a lot of the questions that are hanging out there.
I guess I can address that, and I think Chris probably has some things to say about it too. There are several companies that have created some products that could be retroactively put on OBD2 vehicles that have what we consider some exposed controller area networks. CAN is one of our biggest concerns because it's super fast. It's like that sprinter where all you have to do is just stick your foot out and they fall down, they get hurt. And that's kind of the way CAN is. It's doing so many things and it does it so fast that it's easy once somebody gets on the other side of the network to do some damage. So there are several products out there. And again, because I don't want to take up too much time, if you look up some of the columns that I've written for both Advanstar and Babcock's, I've researched those and put some information out on those, and I think that'll sort of help. But Chris has really been dealing with this more from the technical side of it, so I'll shut up and turn it over to him.
Well, thanks, Donny. There are, as great as technology is, it seems like there's a limited number of applications for ADAS and for connected cars for existing cars, ADAS being advanced driver systems. Some of these do use the OBD2 port and some do not. There actually are a handful of companies that manufacture cameras and sensors and radar and LiDAR and things like that that can be retrofit onto existing cars. The problem is the price point is typically too much. So if you take an 8-year-old car or 5-year car, whatever. And not many people can go out and spend $2,500 to get their car set up so they can do adaptive cruise control or lane checking and all that kind of stuff. So price point is a big issue. There is the question, though, and I don't know if this is part of what was meant, of how do the cars coming off the assembly line now going off into the future that have semi-autonomous, ADAS, or at some point full connected car technologies, how are they going to relate to the hundreds of millions of cars that are on the road today that don't have any of that technology? And that's a big question that I'm not sure anybody's been able to answer. I'll just give you one example, though, of something I found fascinating. I was on a panel out at CES this year on this topic, and one of the panelists has developed technology that takes mobile phones, which smartphones go with us everywhere we go, and somebody gets in the car, they put the phone beside them, so the phone is with them wherever the car goes. And this technology enables existing cars to have connected car functionality because the phones can talk to each other, sense where each other is, can detect the motions and the acceleration and braking of the car because of the sensors in the phone. So now it can detect, compared to other phones, the relative distance between each other. It's fascinating technology that can potentially warn drivers when something bad is getting ready to happen. And that would be applicable to any car because it's based on a smartphone that goes with you wherever you go. So the bottom line is there are some applications out there to help create some of this technology for existing cars, but there's not a lot. Not a lot that's affordable anyway.
And just a follow-up to that, we've had a couple of shop owners to ask, and Wayne, maybe you can address this, at this point in time, to work on these new vehicles, does it require any special permission or licensing from the OEs?
Maybe I'll even defer to Donny, but not that I'm aware of. I mean, that's while we are certainly talking about the future, not a lot has really changed with the vehicles that are rolling into a shop today. Like everything in the auto industry, things will change incrementally with each model year. But I'll defer to Donny, who's in a shop every day. But as far as I know, there's no sort of plan for licensing just to access a vehicle.
Donny?
Yeah, so my answer would be, at this point, I've not seen anything like that. There are a lot of new routines involved in the scan tools that are on the OE scan tool exclusively because the aftermarket hasn't caught up with them yet. And frankly, it would be early for them to catch up with them. So if you are working on that really new stuff, and this, of course, goes mostly to our collision folks, you're going to need a way for an OE scan tool to integrate with that tool for things like aligning ADAS cameras and all of those functions that really are part of the collision process and alignment process. So that no special needs. The scan tool's got the passwording, if you will, to get in and out of those systems, open them and close them, built into it. And we've actually seen a couple of demos of that. It's pretty neat. And we've got Mazda's and Volkswagen are both doing some demos, or Audi rather, for us at Nice Cars this year. So we get a chance to see them there.
This is an issue area we haven't touched on really, but it is important and it's reality. Where do we get tomorrow's technicians to work on all these types of new technologies?
From the computer science departments of colleges. I don't know. That's a good question.
So,
Donny, you're a part of the test writing team at ASE. What do you think?
Well, I think that this is actually going to be what we've been looking for. We have a hard time getting counselors and folks to really understand how complex what we do is. The fact that we sometimes get dirty doing what we do seems to minimize the talent that's required. And so I think it's really going to be an advantage to not only the repair shops that are struggling, but the entire industry that's trying to attract those kids. I work with the STEM program at Wheat Ridge High School, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. And these kids are amazing, and they're doing things because somebody said you need to learn how to do it. And now they're saying, you mean the cars do this too? So I think we've got a real opportunity there to bring those kids in. But we have to really seriously look at our model and how we are bringing those kids in. Telling them they've got to spend $50,000 on tools to even walk through our door, that may be a bit of a problem.
Hey, Donnie, just to add to that real quickly, this may take several years, but if the influence of the tech companies like like Apple and Google and so forth and so on, if that continues, and we all believe it will, there could be a positive benefit from that when you connect what they're doing to cars that eventually be worked on by the repair community, and then the potential employees, potential techs or whatever, can see the connection between those companies, the interface, high tech, et cetera, et cetera. So it could be a draw there.
Agreed.
Well, we're nearing the end here, and I want to go back to something that I think all of you have alluded to at some point about these issues, the industry talking, et cetera. How is the industry working together? Just any or all of you want to comment on that to make sure we're communicating and find solutions as we hit issues.
Well, I guess I'll go then. We've been holding many meetings, and I know sometimes they feel like we're not getting anywhere, but one of our biggest challenges has been learning how to understand each other, learning how to communicate at the really technical levels we need to. And so we started, I believe, back in 14, in February, or maybe it was 15, I don't remember, but we've been holding quite a few meetings. We've got several coming up, and we've got whole groups that are working together. The OEs have got their ISAC that they're working under, which I think is going to be very helpful overall. The aftermarket has got a telematics task force that's made up of just about any stakeholder who's involved. And then we bring both of those elements together. So far it's been a couple of times a year. And I think we're really starting to figure out how these communications can be effective. And I also think we've really seen a lot of very opposing views say, oh, we're really not that opposing after all. So I've been really happy to see where we've been going, and I'd like to just see us continue to go down that path as long as we possibly can and get as much done as we can.
Well said.
Yeah, I can build off that, Donnie. You know, these conversations have been ongoing, but as I sort of said in one of my earlier conversations, one of my earlier answers, you know, it's tough to predict where things are going. So then, for us to have a discussion about how to fix what we don't know where things are going, it actually makes it kind of challenging. And I know one thing out there, if I can draw this back to technical, one thing out there that I think is driving some of this uneasiness in the aftermarket is this idea that, well, cybersecurity is a threat, so that's going to mean that the feds are going to crack down on OEs on cybersecurity, so the OEs are going to get rid of the OBD2 port because that's an exposure, and that's going to lead to repairers being shut out, or some version of that story. The thing that I always point to is, the OBD2 port is required by both California law and federal law, and the only thing we've seen with the OBD2 port recently is California last year, or conceivably that could have been the year before now, was looking to expand the use of that port. So it's just not an immediate threat. In certainly some of our lifetimes, are we still going to have an OBD2 port? No, we'll probably moderate, find a new solution in the future. But this idea that there's an immediate possibility that the OBD2 port is just going to disappear, it just isn't real. And I do think, and looping back to the original question, it's important when we're sort of negotiating or trying to understand where each side is coming from, to get to the heart of this sort of fear that I think is driving some of the conversation, and understand what it is that the other side is trying to fix and why they feel that way and what it is that they think, is the threat that needs to be fixed. And I think that has gone a long way to help us, understand each other, which is important.
Thanks, Wayne. We're nearing the end here, so I want to thank Wayne and Chris and Donny for taking the time to do this today. And we give you a round of applause, but we got all the participants muted. I want to thank the participants for being with us, and we look forward to doing a program later on telematics again. If you would like to view a recording of today's program, it'll be made available on ASA's website very soon. If you have any other questions, please contact ASA's Washington, D.C. office. Donny plugged it earlier. If you are available on August 12th, we'll have a Telematics and Technology Forum sponsored by ASA and the Alliance at NACE in Anaheim, California. On behalf of ASA and our presenters, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.